Hello Spotlight community, and welcome back to our podcast about diversity and inclusion. Today we are going to deconstruct the concept D and I together. We will try to understand what D, diversity, stands for and what I, inclusion, stands for. And I will also share a little secret with you why I personally really wanted to include B in our abbreviation, belonging. So step by step. My name is Evgenia and I'm a founder of Spotlight Agency, where we help organizations to make diversity and inclusion an integral part of their everyday operations, everyday routines, like business, HR, marketing, and other routines. So, and this channel is also our initiative to share with you all these insights and experiences we are gaining through working with different clients. And also we would like to hear from you. What are your insights, what's your gain, and what's your pain? So let's communicate, and by dialogue we will both get better. So let's start. Probably you've seen other abbreviations on internet or in the press than D and I, than diversity and inclusion. Probably you've also seen E, which stands for equity, or you've seen G, which stands for justice, or A, which stands for accessibility. And to be honest with you, there is no such a thing like this is a correct definition, this is a correct abbreviation, and this is wrong. It's actually up to each organization to think really thoroughly, what am I doing with this work, with D&I work, and why am I doing it? Do I really need to add A to my abbreviation or not? Or is it already included in D&I? So I will share with you our insights and how we in Spotlight have been thinking when we have chosen DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So probably experts who are listening to this podcast will have other opinions, and I'm really happy to hear it. If you have other understanding of this terminology, of this concept than me, please share in comments or contact me so we can keep discussing. It's really interesting to hear what you think. So diversity, it's first, D stands for diversity. What does it mean? Diversity is, to put it short, it's all about representation. It's about, if I look in my team, does this team represent the area we're working in or industry we are working in? If I only have middle-aged white women, and if majority of them are from Ukraine, probably I am not diverse, because I'm working in Sweden, and this geographical area and also area of diversity and inclusion I'm working in is much more diverse than only this group. So this is about representation. In order to understand diversity better, I would look at it from a little bit different perspective and discuss what diversity is not. Diversity is not about one simple individual, one unique individual. I really personally really dislike the term diverse hire or diverse candidate, because for me it's not about diversity. For me it's about tokenism. It's like you hire someone to represent something. You hire a woman of color to represent all women of color, not because of the competence this woman brings with her to your team, but because of this unique identity marker, color of the skin. So diversity is not about one person. It always starts when there is a group. The second part, what diversity is not. Diversity is not about a certain identity marker. And by identity marker, I mean a certain characteristic of an individual, innate characteristic. It can be age, it can be gender, it can be ethnicity, or it can be religious background, like something which identifies me specifically. So it's not about that. Diversity is about a mixture of all identities markers. It's all about intersectionality. Let me give an example. When Black Lives Matter campaign happened, many companies became aware of this extreme discrimination in the labor market, something which many didn't think about before. So then it became a wave of recruitment of people of color into different workplaces in order to patch things up and to show, like, look, here we are really strongly supporting this campaign, and we are not discriminatory organization. We are really working inclusively with this group. But in this case, the organization does what it does. It does support this movement of Black Lives Matters, and it is not about diversity in this case, because many companies have chosen one identity marker, and then they started to hire this diverse hires, so diverse candidates. But diversity is again about representing the context you are working in, your industry or your geographical area. So you really need to look outside of these trends or campaign and see whom I can employ, whom I can have on my team, who represent broader than one identity marker. So this is about diversity, and this is how we work with diversity in Spotlight. Diversity actually something which is relatively easy to measure. You can just look at statistics, or you can just run surveys and you can see who is actually represented in your teams, who is represented in leadership, and then you can, if you want to understand why this or that individuals, this or that group is not represented, you can basically go back to employees, go back to leadership, and also have qualitative interviews or focus groups. So this is how we work with diversity in organizations. The next parameter in this D&I concept is equity. And equity is all about structures, all about context. Equity is when in your organization you really actively work to provide access to information and opportunity and growth to all, undepending on their background. And we all know that there are some groups which are quite underrepresented, both when it comes to leadership positions, and also salary differs between the groups. So equity is all about to detect if there are any differences in my organization, and also to actively work with these differences, to actively patch this work. So what equity is not, equity is definitely not about parity, that I really want to make everything equal for everyone. Because sometimes some groups which are traditionally underrepresented, I really need to create quota, or I really need to help them, to empower them a little bit extra. So maybe I put a little bit extra money and efforts on some groups in order to lift them and in order to create this equity. So it's not about total parity, like I treat everyone exactly the same. Is to make sure that everyone is treated the same. The second thing, what equity is not about. Equity is not about one concrete individual, one concrete Ukrainian woman in your organization whom you need to lift. Equity is actually about the system, about your routines, about your strategies, and how you implement and follow up the strategies in practice. So equity is not about parity, and equity is not about individual worker in your team, but about the system in your organization. So this is what equity is about. And how do we deal with it when we come and help organizations, our Spotlight team? Equity is also something which you can easily see when you run surveys and when you read organizational policies and strategies. You can really see if these policies and strategies actively work with equity, and if there is a plan how to actually empower, to lift groups which are traditionally underrepresented, both when it comes to recruitment, how to open up my organization for them, but also how to make a favorable conditions, how to make this milieu environment friendly for this group to feel good there. So this is about equity. Then after equity, we come to inclusion. I stands for inclusion. And what is inclusion? It is really a huge difference between diversity and equity and inclusion. Inclusion is not something you can mandate as an organization. It's not something you can order people to do, like hire more of this group or hire more of that group, like in terms of when we speak about diversity, or when we speak about equity and system, like write this strategy and let's be aware about that in order to actively create good conditions so these differences, these groups all feel good in our team. Inclusion is actually about impact, is actually about results of these actions which you do in diversity and equity. Inclusion is about feeling. What does your team feel? What does every individual employee feel in your organization? Do they feel included? Do they feel accepted? Actually, I really don't like the word accepted, but do they feel included, and do they feel at home, that can be their natural selves without being afraid to express who I am, or without being ridiculed, like people laugh at you for what you are. So basically, for us, inclusion goes really hand in hand with belonging. And when we speak about being spotlight, we speak a little bit about what Brené Brown, this very famous researcher, you can Google her or watch on YouTube her amazing videos about belonging. We really want to achieve, when it comes to belonging, what Brené Brown is speaking about. Belonging is all about that each individual is actually a group animal. Each individual wants to feel included, wants to feel relaxed, wants to be a part of a bigger context, a part of a group. And she speaks in this context about belonging and about fitting in. Fitting in is when you need to really adapt yourself. You really need to think, okay, how shall I behave in order to really be a part of this group, that they really accept me. This is why I don't like the word acceptance, because belonging is not about that. So how do I need, what parts of me do I need to cut, do I need to adjust, to change in order to fit in this context? Belonging is something opposite. Belonging is when you don't think about any of that. Belonging is when you can be your authentic self, and you really can express what you think, what you feel, and be yourself in organizational context without reflecting, without trying to fit in, and you are respected for who you are. You're heard and seen. And this is something which doesn't happen by itself, and this is something which a strategy cannot fix and statistic cannot catch. So inclusion and belonging are measured in a totally different way compared to diversity and equity. This is a qualitative part of D&I work. This is when you really talk to people, when you observe, and when you try to, through training, through discussions, through awareness raising, when you try to change organizational culture towards this belonging feeling, towards this, to make the organization the place where individuals feel that great, where individuals don't need to fit in or don't need to think about being accepted. They can be who you are and do a great job and be the most loyal employee, exactly because they feel that great. So this is what we mean by belonging. And actually belonging is an ultimate goal for us. So when we meet teams, of course we do, in order to come to belonging, of course we do a lot of work at the beginning with measuring, with analyzing how diversity looks like, how equity looks like, how we can make that happen. But that all is about, more or less, about compliance with the laws, these two first parts of abbreviation. It's all about compliance with anti-discrimination law, and in Sweden it's also a law about active measures for employers. But inclusion and belonging, on the other side, it's not mandated by a law. It's something which you as employer can choose to have, or you can choose to ignore it. But I can promise you the results you have are totally different with or without inclusion and belonging. And I've seen it in many workplaces. And inclusion and belonging is a process. It cannot be achieved through 1 or 2 consultancy sessions. That requires strategy, very meticulous follow-up, redoing the plan, and again putting in action the new plan. So it's about constant work, but also the fruit you get, the results you get, they're really worth all these efforts. So this was about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how we in Spotlight Agency work with that when we meet companies, when we meet our clients. And it's also how we are building our internal culture. Belonging is absolutely most important, a part of this abbreviation for us, but this cannot happen if we are not actively working with the other 3. So as you see, justice and accessibility kind of are already a part of our abbreviation. It's also about diversity when we speak about accessibility, for example, and justice is about equity, and belonging is when different groups feel at home. It doesn't really matter if you use a wheelchair, if you have a different skin color, or if you're a woman, a man, or which sexual preference you have. You feel belong, it means that organizations have created such environment for you that you do feel authentic self and you do feel belonging. So that's all for me for today. Please comment what you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how do you interpret, how do you work with this concept in your environment, and also if you agree or disagree with my definition. And also, if you like this podcast, please like it and share so we can reach out to more professionals in the field and also more people who are interested in these definitions and can have a broader discussion with more people. Thank you for me and have a great day where you feel belonging in whatever context you are today.